بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر صدق الله العظيم.
Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. My name is Hasnain Raza Mirza, and they have put me as the president of this Golden Ring Economic Forum, just because it was, as they say, it was my idea some time back. I welcome everybody. I welcome Ambassador Riaz Khan Sahab, Ambassador Jalani Sahab, and Ambassador Tarmeena Sahaba, all of you. And I also see Ambassador Masood Khan Sahab also there. So also welcome to him. And I welcome all other my participants who are participating today. I'll just quickly go. We wanted somebody from the UMT. They will also come and join us, and they will also give a small introduction. But before we start the webinar, I will just like to give a very few words on the Golden Ring Economic Forum and what is the concept of today. We already discussed something. We have already sent you a brief on Golden Ring, so most of you know. This organization, as it was formed as a think tank and a lobbying group back in 2015, and we got registered officially in 2016. So since then, we have been working on this for a strategic economic cooperation between Pakistan, China, Russia, Iran, and Turkey. So these 5 regional countries. So that's why, if you see on the globe, this is a ring and golden, because more than 30% of the total share of natural resources belong to these 5 countries. There was several reasons of making and forming this new group and the initiative. Basically, it was primarily for our own Pakistan national interest and economic and national security. When we call national security, national economic security, we talk of the whole thing. It is a defense and economy, and agriculture, and everything. So it was in the interest of our national economic security. So what we proposed to have a grouping. We initially started to call it a block of these 5 countries. But recently we had long discussions with our partners countries from China, Russia, and Iran, and Turkey. So, but at the end of as a result of these discussions with their higher ups, with the political side and the commercial side, they have all suggested that to start with, let's call it a Golden Ring Economic Group of countries. Instead of calling it a block, they say that when you call a block, it suddenly gives a big, sort of a blow. So let's keep it a bit, milder and call it a group of Golden Ring countries. So now we are putting it as a group of Golden Ring countries. So since our inception, we had good achievements. Ambassador Tarmeena, you were there in 2017 when there was this Parliamentary Speakers Conference at Islamabad, and वो जो हमारे उस वक्त के स्पीकर थे he managed it. Actually, we have lobbied for it quite strongly in all these 5 countries, and we have convinced Riyaz Sadiq Sahab to go for this venture, and it was a success. And then you remember it became a permanent forum. The next conference was in Tehran, and then was Ankara, and I think now next will be somewhere in Moscow or China, once the COVID thing is over. So this thing has started. Similarly, we had another initiative which we launched was a shared economic recovery, post-corona shared economic recovery with Pakistan, China, Iran, and Russia. So that was also taken very seriously and very well taken by all the involved countries. And they came forward with a lot of ideas and how can we jointly come out of the impacts and the fallout of the COVID-19 on our economic side. And so similarly, this type of things we have been doing. And now, but what is happening, you all know, it's your field, it's not such my field, but you guys know it better, that what is happening around Pakistan in the region. There are you can say, alliances are being formed, and some of these alliances we feel that are not very much conducive, may not be very much conducive towards our national security. One thing which was just recent was we have seen the Israel and the UAE joining hands, and Israel and India already had. So we see it in a different way. You know, our most of our oil, our energy sources are from the Persian Gulf countries, UAE and Saudi Arabia mainly. And if we do not have any contract with Israel, and if we tomorrow we are afraid, it may be I may be wrong, but I hope I should be wrong, but this is a fear that tomorrow if they want to to squeeze squeeze us, or to put pressure on us, they may restrict our oil supplies, our energy supplies from these countries, which we feel and which we fear. And a lot of people in the private sector here in the industry, they fear that this is going to happen. We hope it won't happen, but we have this thing. We actually, why we are saying this, because they want to curtail China and Russia from coming into warm waters, into Indian Ocean and Arabian Sea. So all those things are there. We see it in a different perspective also. Like you have CMF, the Combined Maritime Forces sitting there, NATO forces are there in Persian Gulf, in Arabian Sea. So actually, look at from the other side, that China and Russia may see it, and they are seeing it an attempt that tomorrow their outlet, which they have as the form of Gwadar, that it can be blocked. Our own lines can be blocked, trade lines which are going from maritime trade lines. So these are the things which are happening. So we have to, one, as the concept that Vilasabhi also described, we have to very carefully now chalk out our foreign policy. What we see, we have been sorry sir, please don't take it personal, but we have been in the past, our policies were more not we were on a day-to-day basis sort of thing, that we don't want to annoy this country, we do not want to annoy the other country, and then we were just trying to do some firefighting. This is our feeling here. So now what we are suggesting, that under this new scenario, we should be coming up with policies which are more based on national interest, not somebody else's interest, and more on the regional collaboration, regional strategic economic collaboration, so that our national security is ensured. And so this is what we want to do. And here we would like from you to have your suggestions, that how quick, how early, and how we can manage this, or we can achieve this type of thing, and what are your suggestions, that looking at what is happening in the world and around us, around the region. And we have a lot of things hanging on us. We have FATF on us, we have IMF pressure, we have also probably sort of a lot of pressures. And just one small thing before I finish, that if you remember, we are trying to build a pipeline with the Russians. The contract has been awarded, but it has not been started yet, because every time we want to start, the Russian company, any national company coming in, the Americans put a sanction on that. And then they say, okay, now this company is under sanction, then come up with a new company. They again come up with a new company, and the same thing is keep on happening. So these are things that are happening, which basically we see that there is Pakistan is becoming what they call in our गैंडों की लड़ाई में झाड़ियों की पिटाई हो रही है, और वो हमारा जो लैंड है पाकिस्तान, इसको this will be is being used for settling their score or something. So, sir, with this thing, I thank you once again very much to all of you, and I would like to hear your suggestions and comments and concrete ones, so that how we can do this very correctly, I would say, put our foreign policy on a corrective path. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Sir, General Secretary, sir, over to you.
Thank you, Hasnan. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. And for some of our colleagues who are sitting far away, still good morning. As you are aware, through a series of webinars, the Golden Ring Economic Forum seeks to generate a discussion on the effects of the evolving regional developments around Pakistan and how Pakistan can adjust to the evolving opportunities in the short and mid-term for its strategic security. Just as a background, the discussions are intended to draw relevance from the developments which are taking place around us, such as the effects of the worldwide economic slowdown as a result of COVID-19, especially on Pakistan, our own internal political discord which we see at the moment and which we see brewing up and becoming an area of concern even for the common man. Our internal inflation, which is affecting the livelihood and the day-to-day routine of the common man. The evolving environment in Afghanistan as to which side will it finally come down to. Ongoing confrontation between China and India, the Indian government's belligerence against Kashmiris in particular and Muslims in general, Pakistan's relations with the Arab world in the light of the increasing Indian, US and Israeli influence, Pakistan's relations with Iran and Russia, the threat of FATF and other similar international monetary regimes which continue to, in a way, impede Pakistan's economic progress. We are looking at today's webinar, which is the second in the series, is focused on what adjustment Pakistan needs to make in its foreign policy in order to draw maximum benefit from the changing environment, especially from the Golden Ring countries, namely Russia, China, Iran, and Turkey. For this purpose, ladies and gentlemen, we have today with us a panel of very eminent speakers who have been involved in issues of foreign policy formulation and its implementation at the highest level. We have amongst us today Ambassador Riaz Mohammad Khan, Ambassador Jalil Abbas Jalani, Ambassador Tahmina Janjua. And we are seeking as GREF from them their recommendations whether Pakistan needs to make adjustments in its foreign policy, and if so, what would be their recommendations? Will a closer grouping with Golden Ring countries help Pakistan evolve an independent and interest-driven foreign policy? We have participants from across Pakistan and also some from abroad. I'm sure they will take part in the question answer session by seeking answers to questions which are agitating their minds. Question time will be allocated after all three speakers have spoken. I will request the participants who wish to ask a question to indicate to me either by raising their hand or sending a message in chat that they would like to ask a question. This will help me as the moderator to provide an opportunity to allow maximum persons to participate. I will start today's session with Ambassador Riaz Mohammad Khan. And before I give him the opportunity to speak, just to acquaint those who are not aware of his achievements. This was something new to me, sir, also, that he started his career as a lecturer in mathematics in Punjab University in '65. And he served as Pakistan ambassadors to China, European Union, Belgium, Luxembourg, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. He participated in Geneva talks on Afghanistan, led Pakistan's side for the Pakistan-India Composite Dialogue and Pakistan-US Strategic Dialogue, and was appointed a special envoy for back-channel diplomacy with India. Here I remember his tall height and his domineering voice was sufficient for us to gain, in a way, certain angles over the Indians. Ambassador Riaz Muhammad Khan was appointed as the Foreign Secretary in 2005. And for those who are not aware, he also has written and published books, Afghanistan and Pakistan, Conflict, Extremism, and Resistance to Modernity, then Untying the Afghan Knot, Negotiating the Soviet Withdrawal. And apart from that, he has also published coffee table books, Glimpses of Vistas, History, and Culture. Sir, the mic is yours.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, General Sikandar Afzal, for introducing me in such generous terms. I'm not a very tall personality at all. And surely in diplomacy, that doesn't help. So the other thing I want to say is that unfortunately, I have not been able to prepare anything for this particular seminar. The reason being that I injured my hand about 2 weeks ago, and I can't write, I can't type. So that has been an obstacle. Nonetheless, when I saw this proposal for the webinar and the title about this golden ring countries, so I was genuinely intrigued, and I thought to myself it would be very useful to participate in the webinar and to see how you are looking at this particular initiative. What are the parameters of this initiative? I'll make a few observations, and perhaps my colleagues can take over from that. First of all, the question that Hasnain Saab has raised, that is there a need for some changes in our foreign policy? Now, this is something I can tell you, that in the Foreign Office, people who are concerned, who are in the seats, not the retired types like myself, but they are constantly preoccupied with this issue, and see what we can adjust, what we can do. But then foreign policy doesn't depend on you entirely. Foreign policy basically is shaped by the environment, and the environment keeps on changing. Have we been used by others? People, talk about Afghanistan, people talk about war and terrorism, etc. But I can tell you that we had also our own interests at stake, why we took the kind of decisions that we took at that time. In Afghanistan, I remember there was a big debate in the 1980s, and certainly Ziaul Haq Saab was very much inclined to help the resistance. But this was debated, and one thing which became critical was not this whole question of Soviet Union at that time seeking the warm waters, but what became critical was that the Soviet pattern has been that if they are able to consolidate themselves in a country, then the pressure comes on the next country. And the next country was Pakistan. So this basically decided that this is not acceptable to us. We must ask for withdrawal of the Soviet troops. And then there is a whole history of what happened later on. Terrorism, we tried our best with the Taliban that they should somehow or the other hand over Osama bin Laden to Saudi Arabia. But Mullah Omar was a different kind of personality. I remember Shuja Nawaz's book in which he quotes General Mahmoud, who was DGISI at that time and had gone to meet Mullah Omar. And he says that General Mahmoud said that it is extremely difficult to convince a man of faith. And his faith is that the United States is not a greater power than the power of Almighty. Anyway, one can say that, look, finally the Americans are leaving, wanting to leave. But the thing is that 20 years of the national life in Afghanistan has been lost. I think the Afghan leadership particularly has to, and their neighbors, in particular Pakistan, have to have some deep thinking as to what we have achieved in these 40 years of warfare, of conflict. All these initiatives that you are talking about, the relations with Russia, relations with other countries, one of the biggest hurdles has been the continuing conflict in Afghanistan. Because if you look at the various models, now here I would also touch upon one other point. Strategic is a very overused word. When you have, for example, economic strength, you also develop a certain strategic maneuverability in your own region, in your own area. So it creates a gravity. So in this forum, I would first suggest that we should also try to define the focus of this. We can, of course, talk about foreign policy, we can talk about strategic matters, defense matters, security matters, all that. But what is the core area which this group would want to address? If it is, for example, economic relationship, promotion of economic relationship, economic cooperation, which I think presents by itself a very daunting challenge, then we have to see some other models like the European Union, like the ASEAN, like the Mercosur, like the GCC. What seems important in these models is certain complementarities. Complementarity in terms of economies, complementarity in terms of industrial productions, complementarity in terms of technological prowess and how they can help each other in that very important area. Then there is the question of connectivity, geographical continuity. All these things, they become very important. Connectivity, now when it comes to the this particular initiative, I find that with Russia, we don't have much of a connectivity because of Afghanistan. Central Asia is in between. But in Central Asia, I can tell you, I served over there. Every important country was in Central Asia except Pakistan, and Pakistan was blocked because of the Afghan conflict. Anyway, we lost on that count quite a bit, but nonetheless, hopefully there would be opportunities. So Russia, we don't have. Iran, Turkey, yes, we have tried. ECO was one model, ECO then expanded another model, But despite our very good intentions and good intentions expressed by all the members, ECO has not taken off. So we have to see why it has not taken off. It is because when it comes to economy, the economic prowess of the countries, individual member countries, that is key. Now take, for example, China. We have very, very important relationship with China, and that has all kinds of dimensions. I don't want to go into that. But sometimes we, instead of building the sinews of the economic cooperation between the two countries and the relationship, we are engaged in platitudes. Economic cooperation. What is the trade between China and Pakistan? Barely about, I think now, $15 billion, or even less than that, I think $12 billion. What is the trade between India and China, who are at loggerheads? It's close to $100 billion. What is the trade between United States and China? $500 billion. Look at these figures. These are very important figures. So the thing is that we have not been able to develop. We developed, for example, preferential trade agreement with China in 2003. And we had all the tariff lines given to us that we could export under those, whatever we wanted, under those without any tariffs. But what happened? We have nothing to sell to China. We are stuck with a couple of things: the gray cloth, the yarn, and the cotton bales. This is that we are stuck with. So we have to develop that kind of complementarity. We talk a lot about Gwadar, and Gwadar is very important. But Gwadar, the fact is that it has not yet developed its potential as it should have been. We talk about the strategic importance, and I think the best way to somehow harm the Gwadar initiative, which was taken way back in 2002, I think, so is to keep on emphasizing its strategic importance while not developing its economic potential. It was, to begin with, it was Mr. Musharraf's days when it started. To begin with, it was supposed to be a transshipment port, an energy port, and a port to serve the hinterland. And hinterland, we had the Baluchistan and area, etc. But apart a second port apart from Karachi. But apart from that, we were hoping that there would be peace in Afghanistan, and there would be Central Asian goods which would come pass through Gwadar and all that. We have not even been able to develop transshipment capability to any extent. The energy port idea has not taken off yet. So the thing is that what is important is that we have to develop these muscles, economic muscles. Take, for example, KKH. That's the only route that we have with China. KKH is still not capable of taking 40 feet containers. It only takes the 20 feet containers. And we are asking the Chinese will do it. They will upgrade this route, but it is one of the most difficult routes anywhere in the world. In comparison, if you look, for example, the Chinese policies with Central Asia, one of the first things they did, and that was way back in 1993, was to have agreements with Central Asian countries, boundary agreements on those boundaries which they had always contested with the Soviet Union. But so it's established trust between them. With that, they opened, with Kazakhstan, I know, 2 road links and 1 railway link. And that railway goes right up to Europe. So from 1994 onwards, that activity has been going on. China is the largest trading partner of Central Asia. So we have to basically think in terms of very, very practical measures. One other thing that comes, and I'll finish that because I think one can keep on talking. I don't have a written text so that I can confine myself. So one of the things is infrastructure for trade and economic cooperation. Now, for economic cooperation, I think with all these countries, rather than having joint ventures involving all others, if you have bilateral ventures involving each one of them, wherever it is possible, I think that will create a certain mass for a meaningful economic cooperation between involving all these countries. Take, for example, the idea of special economic zones. Now, special economic zones is not a new idea, but you have to do a lot. In China, where I was ambassador, I know there were scores of special economic zones. There were certain things which were guaranteed in terms of connectivity, in terms of electricity, in terms of roads, in terms of your internet links, all those kinds of things, in terms of flattening the ground, so that any company from outside which was interested, it could come, set up its shop, and it was a one-window operation. In Pakistan, we have been talking about this goddamn one window, sorry, pardon my language, for a very long time. But where is it? I have seen, there have been my friends, my old friends, Pakistanis, who wanted to, in their old age, come to Pakistan. They have been abroad, they had made money and wanted to invest and do something. And after about 2 years, 3 years, in disgust, they left. And a couple of them that I asked them, why did they do that? They said that even for small things, we have to run from pillar to post. And at this age, we are not in a position to do that. So where is it? What is it? You know, our systems, in a way, we have failed. Then, so the economic zones. Good idea, but this good idea needs a lot of work, a lot of homework. And we are always very, very weak when it comes to homework. I must say, and it's a credit, although I have also criticism about the army, don't misunderstand me, but I think the projects that we have with China in the defense area or in the nuclear power area, they have been doing well. But all in the other areas, you know, there have been so much controversy and so much problems. Anyway, so the other things are the other infrastructure like banking, like tariffs, all that. I have given you one example of the preferential trade agreement with China, which then later on, after 7 years, was converted into free trade agreement. And then we had been complaining that China is flooding our market, right? But the 7 years when we had free hand to really try to make a place for ourselves, we couldn't do that. Our capacity was not there. We were very busy with our own politics inside the country. So you have to have tariff arrangements, but you have to have banking systems. This is a long shot. And I'll conclude on this, that I hope you will develop a focus on the core interest and then also keep this other activity which relates to foreign policy, the security, etc. But I may just add a note of caution that security, foreign policy, we have been far too preoccupied with this rather than developing our internal strength politically and economically. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I will now request Ambassador Jalil Abbas Gilani for his views. Ambassador Jalil has 38 years of experience of bilateral and multilateral as a career diplomat, has served as Pakistan ambassadors to the US, Belgium, Luxembourg, European Union, and Australia. He is a specialist in South Asian affairs. Ambassador Jalil has worked as Director General of South Asia and SAARC, was Acting High Commissioner to India and Director India in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He was appointed the Foreign Secretary of Pakistan in 2012. In 2018, the government of Pakistan nominated Ambassador Jalani as the member of the Experts and Eminent Persons Group of the ASEAN Regional Forum, and in 2019 as member of Prime Minister's Advisory Council on Foreign Affairs. He has also served as a senior fellow of leading international think tanks, including the International Institute of Strategic Studies, UK, and the United States Institute of Peace. He is also associated with Center for Aerospace and Security Studies as a director. Ambassador Jalani, all yours.
Thank you very much, General Sikandar Afzal. It's a great honor to be invited by Golden Ring Economic Forum and sharing this panel with two of other distinguished Foreign Service colleagues. With both, I have worked very, very closely, and we consider certainly Ambassador Riaz Ahmad Khan Sahab as a guru and a wise man of the Foreign Service, and he is somebody who has always remained a guide and a teacher for us. Like Riaz Ahmad Khan Sahab, I would like to first of all respond to this question that was posed by you and Hasnain Sahab as to whether there is a need to change the foreign policy. I would share with Riaz Ahmad Khan Sahab that since that we continue to address this question in the Foreign Office and also within all the government stakeholders from time to time. Since 1947, Pakistan faced many challenges, and we were confronted with some of the most formidable hard choices in pursuit of our national objectives. But I think we opted for the best possible options in order to preserve our national interests. If you recall, that we, from a relationship of complete reliance on the United States of America, because in order to address the changing geostrategic environment, we also chose to diversify our relations with other countries. We fought the Soviet Union, but then today we are trying to develop a very close political, economic, and security relationship with Russia. And we also share many commonalities in terms of our views on some of the regional and global issues. China, again, from a purely strategic relationship, we are now diversifying our relationship and trying to introduce economic content to this relationship, which is also moving forward, I think, to a great satisfaction to everybody. With the Middle Eastern countries, again, we have made certain hard choices. If you recall that when we were approached by Saudi Arabia and Turkey, two of our very close friends, to support them on their Syrian initiative, we thought that that did not fall within the principled foreign policy objective that we have pursued. So we did not become a part of the Syrian initiative, to the annoyance of these two friends. And again, I'm sure that you would recall that on the Yemen issue, we also followed a principled position of not getting involved in this Yemeni conflict. On nuclear issue, you know that the kind of pressure that Pakistan was subjected to, but since we thought that that was in the best interest of Pakistan, we pursued it despite all the pressures. And even on Kashmir, relations with India or Kashmir issue, we confronted many, many challenges, but I think we acquitted ourselves very well. Talking about the regional and global challenges, certainly it's a very, very challenging time for Pakistan and our diplomacy. There are many factors that can be listed. One is obviously the US-China strategic rivalry. In the Asia-Pacific, tension is rising since the launch of Asia-Pacific strategy by the Obama administration about a decade ago, and which has been renamed as Indo-Pacific strategy by the Trump administration. And this confrontation that has developed between US and China, it has also impacted on many of the regional dynamics in our region. For instance, Pakistan's close relationship with China is now being viewed with a degree of suspicion. That was not the case earlier when in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, our close relationship with China, they were seen as helpful to the United States of America because of the kind of role that Pakistan played in bringing about a rapprochement between US and China in 1971. Then Pakistan has begun to face pressures on CPEC, both from US and India. And this is also the direct outcome of this strategic rivalry that is developing between US and China. India has been declared as a pivot of the US policy to promote its Indo-Pacific strategy and to contain China. So this is the outcome of this tension. India and the US are forming a close alliance, both in the strategic and security domain. If you recall that in 2018, both India and the United States of America, they signed this agreement, COMCASA, Communication Compatibility and Security Agreement, and now they have signed BECA. And both these agreements, they will certainly embolden India's security in the security domain. And if you look into the details of both these agreements, it also brings US as a silent partner with India in any future conflict that may arise between either India or Pakistan, or for that matter, India and China. India-Pakistan tension has become more pronounced, and India-China conflict has also become it has intensified in the recent years, particularly after the repeal of Article 370 of the Indian Constitution by India. Due to close Indo-US partnership, India remains unwilling to resolve issues issues with Pakistan. I can give several examples whereby India was unable to resolve some of the bilateral issues during the Cold War period. But following the Cold War, many of those India's stance on almost every issue has hardened. And we see further hardening of this their position on every issue after this Modi phenomena, which has been introduced in the Indian politics since, as at the center since 2014. Last year, both India and Pakistan came to the brink of a major war in February when India launched airstrikes against Pakistan. And why I bring this aspect is that even while India launched those strikes against Pakistan, there was a widespread perception because of the statements which originated from the US, from some senior US functionaries, it gave the impression as if India was being encouraged to undertake these operations against Pakistan. Repeal of Article 370 is yet another manifestation of India's high-handedness to annex Indian occupied Kashmir in violation of the UN Security Council resolutions as well as the bilateral agreements. As a matter of fact, the repeal of Article 370 has almost killed the revival of the dialogue process between the two sides, which in any case had been suspended. I would like to argue that since 2014, ever since Prime Minister Modi became the Prime Minister, there has been no substantive dialogue, the official dialogue between the two sides. But some leadership may have met on the sidelines, or Prime Minister Modi may have undertaken a visit to Lahore for international consumption, but then it was obviously devoid of any serious desire on their part to engage Pakistan. There is a constant propaganda that is taking place between the two countries. Trade volume, which had gone up during the peace process that we pursued from 2004 to 2008, from $250 million, we brought the trade level to almost $3 billion between our two countries, which was likely to go further up in the next 3-4 years. That has also slowed down. That had slowed down, and after last year's Indian action, it has almost suspended, the trade relations suspended. Our mission strengths have also been curtailed since last year. And more worrying for us and other regional countries is that US and India have begun to coordinate their policies or moves, foreign policy moves in respect of all South Asian countries, including Pakistan. I was in Washington as ambassador when India lobbied extensively in order to deny the sale of F-16 to Pakistan and also other equipment, and they did concede the Indian demands. US and India have also joined hands. They have a joint strategy on China-Pakistan Economic Corridor and Financial Action Task Force, because in the last at least 2 years, these are the two countries who are the moving spirit behind Pakistan remaining in the gray list of FATF countries. And then we also have apprehension that in order to divert attention from its domestic issues, India may launch some kind of a hybrid warfare against Pakistan, and contours of this warfare are already visible in the context of some of the recent attacks which have taken place either in Balochistan or in North Waziristan. Closer to us, another country, situation in Afghanistan remains precarious. Despite the intra-Afghan dialogue, the situation remains uncertain. There are attempts by internal and external forces to sabotage the peace process. Violence has intensified in Afghanistan, and in case the ongoing peace process fails, the US will look to find a scapegoat and may lay the blame on Pakistan's doorsteps. So this is a real fear that is there in the minds of almost everybody in Pakistan. Saudi-Iran rivalry again creates difficulty for Pakistan in maintaining a balance in our relations with the two countries. This rivalry, besides political and security challenges, also poses economic challenges for Pakistan. Pakistan-Iran gas pipe project, which is critical for Pakistan and a viable, cheap option for Pakistan to generate energy, again is become a victim of US sanction law and Saudi-Iranian rivalry. Volume of trade, incidentally, between Pakistan and Iran, which can go up to $5 to $6 billion very easily, remains extremely low. I think we are even less than $1 billion between our two countries. Hasnain Sahab mentioned the Israeli factor, the Saudi Arabia, UAE partnership that has developed in recent years. That certainly presents another challenge for us. If we are looking at, for instance, when I was posted in Washington, and if you ask me as to what are the kind of challenges that Pakistan faced in Washington, there are many lobbies working against Pakistan, and one of the most pertinent lobby which works closely with the Indian lobby is the Jewish lobby. It is, they work very closely because of the perception that Pakistan poses a threat to Israeli interests in Washington. And the very fact
I think we are having a glitch. Maybe there is a network problem. Could somebody please just check it out?
The webinar is working fine, sir, over here.
Gee, looks like there is an internet problem at Multan.
Probably, yes, sir.
Ambassador Tahmina, could you switch on your microphone, please? I think Ambassador Jalil is facing some problems at the internet end, and in order not to waste time, we can continue with you. I'll just take a minute or so to introduce yourself. Ambassador Tahmina Janjua has served as Pakistan's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations at Geneva, ambassador to Italy, accredited to Albania, Slovenia, FAO, IFAD, and WFP. She has also served at UN New York. I'm sure most of you remember her from her days when she was the spokesperson of the Foreign Ministry, Director General Strategic Planning, and held important staff appointments with the National Security Advisor and several foreign secretaries. She has represented Pakistan in several international conferences. Ambassador Tahmina was appointed as the Foreign Secretary in 2017. All yours, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum and Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. General Sikandar, Hasnain Raza Saab, Ambassador Riaz Mahmood Khan and Ambassador Jalil Abbas Jalani have both elaborated on our relationships with China, with India, and importantly with the US as well. I intend to structure my intervention by addressing the 4 questions that have been posed in Annex B of your concept paper. In order to answer the first question, that is whether Pakistan needs to make adjustments to its national security and foreign policies, it would be helpful to have greater clarity on the proposed Golden Ring Forum, GREF. It is my understanding that GREF envisages the creation of a formal grouping of countries which would pursue common economic, political, and even security policies. The focus of this grouping or bloc, and I understand from earlier, from what Mr. Hasnain Raza said, that the word bloc is being set aside. Grouping of countries would apparently be economic, but at some places in the concept paper, it is mentioned that they would also have strategic aims, which are left undefined. I have two concerns regarding this proposed bloc or grouping. Even ostensibly, economic groupings have political connotations. Suspicions are aroused about the objectives and the ultimate formal aims of any grouping. For instance, any formal grouping which includes Iran, China, Russia, Pakistan, Turkey, under present circumstances, could inevitably raise concerns. On one hand, amongst one of our key Arab friends, and on the other, amongst some Western countries, especially the United States, considering the rhetoric that is going on in the world right now with regard to China and the US. Secondly, the proposed GREF does not seem to take into account our experiences with similar economic and political groupings, primarily RCD and ECO, and even the D8. The D8 was referred to by Hassan Raza Sab earlier on. These groups were formed with very similar objectives, but their potential remains unrealized. The reasons are both political and economic. You will find that those reasons for underperformance and unsatisfactory outcomes could also apply to the proposed GREF. Hence, by establishing a new formal grouping, we may not be able to achieve even the more limited trade and economic objectives we have in mind. Leave aside the more vague and ambitious strategic objectives which have been alluded to in the concept paper. I would contend, therefore, that the economic and trade objectives that are envisaged in GREF initiative should be pursued bilaterally with the target countries and by reinvigorating existing regional mechanisms, especially the ECO. A long-time concept could be the GREF in the long term, but at the present time, considering the politics, considering what's happening in the world, perhaps setting up another grouping may cause some difficulties. I was present, as Hasnan Sab said, at the parliamentary conference that took place in 2016, and I was able to draft a paragraph which became an important part of the declaration on Kashmir, which was a very important breakthrough as far as the parliamentary groups were concerned, because it had Afghanistan, it had all the important players within the region who signed on to it. But that was in the parliamentary context only. Whether other countries in an open discussion within GREF or any such forum would be able to accept that language is something we need to look at. And in the long term, we can have a discussion on it, whether GREF is possible or not. But we should work on the very noble objectives that GREF has with economic and trade in the context of existing regional mechanisms. To do this does not require any radical reorientation of Pakistan's national and security foreign policies. And I would completely agree with Jalil Jilani Saab that with the options that were available to us, Pakistan did choose the best options that were available to us. Sometimes they may have not been best in the foreign policy or in the security policy domain, but at least they were what was considered best at that time in Pakistan's interest. What is required, I believe, is rigorous, sustained analysis of the impediments in the way of expanding our economic ties with regional countries, as well as a more effective multi-stakeholder mechanism for following up on the outcomes of such analysis. And this I say especially because in your grouping, in your board of governors, you have a long list of very important business leaders and corporate leaders who can play a role in this regard. Because what has been often seen lacking is inputs from the private sector, which is important to develop our economic policies towards countries within the region. I'm afraid we will only achieve something if we strengthen our capacity to examine and understand relevant issues, and also drastically upgrade the institutional mechanisms to implement the required measures. Let me give you a few examples as to why this is of utmost importance. Take the issue of our stagnant or almost stagnant economic relationship with Iran. There have been problems, and they are more extra-regional. An overarching problem is that of US sanctions. Because of these, we have been unable to set up banking channels to finance our bilateral trade. Several proposals have been advanced, but we are still in an impasse. And that is because of this overarching extra-regional problem that is there vis-a-vis Iran as such. Besides this core problem, we have also encountered a number of other impediments. These include the imposition of import duties on several of our key export items, such as, if I may say so, from the sublime that has been spoken of by Ambassador Yasmin Khan and Ambassador Jalil Abbas Jalani to the very practical. So import duties have been imposed on export items such as canoes made up garments and seasonally on rice. Additionally, there are non-tariff barriers in the form of SPS certifications and heavy road taxes. And this is where the business community comes in. SPS certifications are something that the business world has to work on. Otherwise, we'll be stuck with only textiles. Now, on all of these specific issues on which there have been endless unproductive negotiations, we would greatly benefit for deeper economic analysis, which would yield more creative solutions. Because whilst political factors are definitely impacting on trade, there is also a rigidity and a lack of imagination. The positions being adopted by the two countries. This can only be rectified by generating a richer set of options, whether on banking arrangements or on the question of NTBs. Secondly, let's take Turkey. We've never had a more political environment that has been so conducive to expanding economic and trade relations. And yet, this expansion is not taking place. The attempt at concluding an FTA has been unsuccessful. This has been, despite our excellent political relations, we find sometimes the other side not willing to open certain sectors where we are also competitive, especially textiles, leather, and agricultural goods. For textiles, they have their own lobby, so they have to cater to that. Additionally, they demand adherence to international technical standards and SPS sanitary and phytosanitary standards. For example, on our meat product exports, we are impeded due to the lack of OIE certification. Again, we need inputs from all stakeholders, especially the private sector, in order to have greater success in our efforts to remove these impediments. Simply including Turkey in another political arrangement will not do the trick. We have to do our own homework. Let me quickly turn to the other questions. Question 3 highlights, I'm not too clear about question 2, so I'll jump to question 3. Question 3 highlights the concerns that I've already referred to. That is, a GREF grouping is likely to arouse misgivings amongst our friends and the United States. And the repercussions can be manifested in all sorts of ways, from added pressure in FATF and stricter conditionalities from international financial institutions. So these have to be all factored in. In the long term, as I said, an aspirational grouping can be looked at, but in the short term, we need to see right now what we need to do for economic and trade relations with these group of countries that you've listed. You are all aware of a defining feature of current global politics, that is the deepening rivalry between US and China. This has troubling implications for lots of countries, including Pakistan. The US is not too happy about CPEC, but we shouldn't worry about the US. We should look and focus on our own national interest as far as CPEC is concerned. So you can imagine what would be the reaction if there would be an economic grouping that involves all these countries that have been mentioned further. This is not to say that we should not pursue our national economic interest as we perceive those to be, but we should pursue our interests in a way that positive outcomes are maximized and negatives are minimalized. So I would repeat that the objectives that GREF initiative seeks to achieve, i.e. expansion of economic and commercial links with some key regional countries, are extremely important objectives, but these may be realized more effectively through sustained, intense efforts that are undertaken bilaterally with these countries and by revitalizing existing regional economic arrangements. Now to come to the fourth question, i.e. the role of media in strengthening ties with regional countries. What the GREF initiative is seeking to do in some ways is something that I've been arguing for a long time, i.e. the need to reestablish the common cultural and economic space that historically existed in the Central Asian region. This space was ruptured by colonial intrusion and of course by the Afghan war. No matter what, right now we need to see how this can be restored. For that, work needs to be done not only in the economic sphere, but equally in the cultural sphere. The historically intense and fruitful exchanges of scholars, artists, and craftsmen across the countries of the region should be recommended by GREF or by scrutiny. Long-standing cultural ties should be reinvigorated. This should greatly facilitate deeper economic and strategic ties. The media clearly has a central role in reminding us of these historical ties and promoting the re-establishment of these ties. We definitely need to pursue an ambitious set of objectives in our relations with our regional neighbors. These objectives should be informed by a grand vision of how we visualize our long-term relationship with these countries. The GREF initiative does reflect this thinking, but it is equally important that we should be practical in the way we seek to realize the objectives we set for ourselves. I will not go into the details of our relations with the countries in the region, which has been very given in detail by my other colleagues. I stop here and I would be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Tamina. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we come to the end of the three speakers. And
Iskandar, I'm back on the...
Oh, sorry, Jia. I didn't see you on the screen. Sorry.
He is back.
G, I mean, then what we will do is we will let you continue where you left off. Yes, there was some internet problem, so we had to go on instead of waiting for everybody.
He was attacked by Jai Hind.
All yours, Zilan.
Well, I had basically listed all the challenges in my earlier presentation, but I wanted to say that despite all these challenges that we are faced with, there are also enormous trade and investment opportunities that are also coming our way. One on the US front, the US is deeply concerned about the Chinese economic and other engagements in Pakistan, and therefore would like to counterbalance it via its own investments. For instance, a bill in the US Congress has been moved by Senator Chris Van Hollen to revive the concept of reconstruction opportunity zones to be established on Pakistan-Afghanistan border. Now, in case this bill is passed, it will certainly create enormous opportunities for Pakistani and US businessmen community to undertake joint ventures. Similarly, we also need to engage the next US administration to revive the strategic dialogue process which had been suspended by Trump administration and establish a working group besides other working groups on the promotion of trade and economic relations. In order to remove US concerns related to CPEC, for instance, it is extremely important that immediately after the new administration takes over, we organize a joint conference involving Pakistan, China, and the US, in order to allay US concerns with regard to China-Pakistan economic corridor, because we would like to the US business community to become part of the economic zones which are being established along the length and breadth of this China-Pakistan economic corridor. On China, again, China wants to extend China-Pakistan economic corridor to Iran and Afghanistan. In case Mr. Biden becomes the president, he will revive the nuclear deal with Iran, and this is something that he has already mentioned in his article that he wrote for the Foreign Affairs magazine. Following the revival of this JCPOA, there are chances that some of the sanctions which have been imposed on Iran, they could also be lifted. In case those sanctions are lifted, then certainly we could enhance our trade and economic relations with Iran as well. Another important aspect which I think Ambassador Riaz Muhammad Khan Sahab also alluded to is the Trans-Himalayan Network initiative that has been introduced by China to link Pakistan, Nepal, Afghanistan, and China through a network of roads connecting through the Himalayan network. So in case that materializes, again, that would also present great opportunities for our community. Negotiations are also underway with Afghanistan to allow trade via Wakhan border. In view of the improved relations between Pakistan and Afghanistan in the last almost a year or so, I think there is a receptivity to this idea even in Afghanistan, and this is something that had been discussed extensively in recent visits between the two countries. These are opportunities, and I think we need to gear ourselves to take advantage of these. One important aspect that I think we need to address is that our business community also needs to develop some lobbying activities in key capitals. Why I say this is because the embassies can establish linkages between the business communities of Pakistan with the respective countries. But then in order to convince the business houses in those countries, I think a lobbying effort is something which is of paramount importance. India, for instance, has extensive lobbying network in the United States of America. They have a designated lobbying firm which is financed by the FICCI and CII. FICCI is the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and CII is Confederation of Indian Industry, and they fund the activities of that lobbying firm, which basically promotes India's business interests in the relevant circles, both in the private sector as well as in the official government level. Similarly, I think we also need to have a similar lobbying activity undertaken in, in Brussels, for instance, which is the European capital. I remember that when we launched this drive to get GST plus concessions from the European Union, when I was ambassador, there were a number of hurdles that we had to face because of various lobbies who were cotton lobby, the textile lobby, the transport lobby, and many other lobbies who were working to deny us this GSP plus, but we were able to get it. But then, in case if we had a lobbying firm helping us with our efforts, that would have been much easier for us to work to undertake. But thank you so much. I think I can respond to other issues in case they're during the question answer session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Excellencies. It was a pleasure listening to you. And before I try and wind up today's session, for those of you who, please do not be taken away from the fact that there are only 17 participants. Because if you open the window of Ayman Khan, you will find over 20 students sitting in one class and watching the whole webinar on a large screen. So we tried to make the arrangements in a manner where maximum students of the UMT can also participate. I will just recapitulate a few things which I thought were very important. And I will start with the last recommendation of Ambassador Jalil Abbas Jalani regarding the involvement of business communities. Actually, to be very honest, it was the effort and realization of our own business community. And when I'm talking about business community, let me also correct the impression here. We are talking about medium and slightly larger industries. We are not talking about the mega industrial tycoons of Pakistan who are part of this group. The mega are not part of this group. The initiative came from them because they felt that whenever they went to, especially our neighboring countries like Russia, Iran, and even China at times looking for concerns and for business opportunities, they also already have interaction there. They found that there were hindrances which they could not overcome in enhancing, even individual trade that they were doing one-to-one with different companies in these countries. And while they themselves came forward, and that is how they said, look, we have, for example, Russia, we have connections in the highest forum, that is the Duma in Russia. And they are willing to come forward and help us in enhancing trade. And well, one of the reasons, then we have highest connections in the Rebels Committee in, again, business community in Iran. They said we can find all ways and we can help you overcome whatever obstacles. And it is with this intention that this group came about and created what we started calling, a block, a strategic block, like Riaz Ahmed Khan correctly said, is a big, big name. And me personally, it hides a lot of things of which we do not want to talk about or define, but we use these terms. We are a small practical group of people who are trying desperately to try and enhance the volume of trade which is already existing within these countries with more opportunities. Jalil talked about the border communities and special zones which are coming up with Afghanistan. That was also one of the proposals that was floated by us about 3 years ago, that in order to overcome the problems with, especially with Iran, of what you call sanctions, open border markets, they already exist in an informal manner. But we, Pakistan, at times makes no money out of it. If you formalize them in a manner that will help traders on both countries formalize the trade, some of the trade will get regulated, and so on it expands. Riaz Mohammed Khan very correctly, as he always does, talked about foreign policies depending upon changing environment. So you're absolutely right, there is no doubt about it. And because the environment around us is changing, that is why we were also concerned that it needs attention. You're talking about economic strength of a country driving foreign policy, you're absolutely correct again. And that is what I would like, especially our students, to take home as a thing that they can think about and come up with ideas of how to go about this. You talked about increasing connectivity. We, as you know, we have had energy projects, TAPI and so on, in the works for years to come, and they were done. We all understand why they were done and why they were developed, but we haven't seen anything come out of it. The more we have our infrastructure coming along, even now, I find if you travel now in Pakistan between Karachi and Lahore, for example, or Pindi, the volume of traffic, just because we have a motorway up to Sakhar, of individual families and cars has multiplied tremendously. Yes, one reason was the restriction on buses due to COVID, but now people tend to drive on the car. It takes you about 14 hours to reach Karachi. I mean, which in my mind is as much as it would take a train from Karachi to Lahore for that matter. Ambassador Tamina talked about grouping and the economic. Yes, you are. I mean, we are not asking for anything radical. Our purpose primarily being focusing initially only on economy and trade and trying to enhance that in whatever manner we can in our endeavor to do that. And we are hoping that as we go along and whatever we can offer in the terms of suggestions which will be coming out of the end of this webinar and others like that, it would, in whatever way we can contribute, and people like you have direct access already into the government channels, but if we can help in formulating it, formalizing it, putting it up to government, I'm sure it would help. I will stop there. I, at the moment, do not see any hands being raised. Probably.
Sir, I have a hand there, if you permit me.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm just going to add a few things what you have said, because there was some point raised by Ambassador Riaz Saab and Ambassador Jilani Saab and our good Ambassador Tamina. The first one was that they said that but the goal of GREF, you have rightly said, is not very clear. Sir, I just want to say that we have a very clear defined mission and a goal, which is more on the economic side. As General Sabha just said, the strategic economic. When we call strategic economics, we are looking at bilateral and multilateral cooperation and their investments of these 4 countries in Pakistan. So that is what we call the strategic economic investment, like CPEC, like we can have Russian economic investments here, Iranians. So that is the first thing. Trade volume, you rightly said. Unfortunately, the trade volume of China, Russia, Iran, and Turkey with the world is $5 trillion plus. And today, Pakistan has only 0.7% share of this $5 trillion market. So if you're very right, and that was the reason why we started working on this GREF idea, and the business community started this thing that we, instead of looking, towards the government that they will do something, let's the business community themselves take an initiative and move forward. So this was the second question, the second point, which is there, connectivity. I have been saying this thing. Some people may not like it. We have got. I think we have got stuck with Afghanistan. There are other routes and ways of connectivity bypassing Afghanistan into Central Asia, through Central Asia and going into Russia, and we have a direct link to China. So I remember when I was in Soviet Union in good old days. I'm talking of 70s and early 80s. There used to be a train coming from Moscow to Tehran, train 92, it used to be called. It used to take 3 days from Moscow to Tehran. So what I want to say is the train link and the road links into Russia, into Moscow, up to Moscow, you can say, are already existing. If we do not even want to use Afghanistan route, we can go via Iran. We can, yes, we are developing our route. You rightly said that KKH is a very difficult route. With the help of China, we are also trying to develop the railroad link into China. And today, if we have to send our container to St. Petersburg, it takes 45 days by ship. But if we go, if we develop over this land route, then we have worked out, we have done some exercise. It will take almost 14 days to reach Katerinburg in Russia. So these connectivity, we have to explore what we are proposing and what we are pushing, that we must explore the existing links there. Then SEZs, sir.
Can I hold you for a minute? We have some students who would like to ask some questions.
Sure, sir.
So they take preference over all of us.
Yes, sir. Okay, sure.
I can hear you, but you'd have to come closer to the mic so that you are better audible.
Okay, just a moment. Just coming to ask some questions.
जी, अब आपकी, हाँ, यहाँ पे आप बिल्कुल ठीक हैं. आपकी आवाज में थोड़ा सा इको है, तो उसका ख्याल रखिएगा, क्योंकि वॉल्यूम अगर आपके स्पीकर का ज्यादा होएगा तो फिर आपका वॉल्यूम इको करेगा.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Can you hear me clearly?
जी, perfect.
Okay. Sir, my question is from all the panels here. Sir, I would like to ask that, as we know that regionalism brings strength to all the members, and we build such an organization to solve political issues too. So would this regional cooperation fail us on Kashmir issue too, just like OIC or any other organization? This remains a basic concern too, sir. Thank you.
Excellencies, any one of you can. His basic question was that if we have this regional grouping, would it fail us like the OIC and other groupings on the issue of Kashmir? I can say a lot, but I will reserve my comments in the presence of such eminent people, please. Please unmute yourself, whoever would like to comment.
Well, I would say that the regional forum involving South Asia, which is SAARC, it bars the member countries to discuss the political issues. So that has remained a major constraint in involving other countries in a discussion on Jammu and Kashmir dispute. But then I feel that in case there is a conducive atmosphere which is created in the region of the kind that we were able to create from 2004 to 2008, when we were making progress on the Jammu and Kashmir dispute in terms of looking at various options. We were also discussing other issues like Siachen issue. We were again close to a settlement on the Siachen issue with the efforts which were being made by Foreign Secretary Riaz Muhammad Khan Sahab, and he was closely involved with the peace process. And then we were also making progress on Sar Creek and other issues. As I mentioned in my earlier briefing, we from 2000, when I left India, I was declared persona non grata from India in 2003. And when I left India, the volume of trade was just $250 million. But when the process started between our countries, the volume of trade went up from $250 million to almost 2.5 billion to $3 billion. Now, this volume increased because of we didn't take any substantive actions on the part of the respective governments. But what we did was to facilitate business-to-business interaction between the two countries, encouraging holding of trade exhibitions between the two countries. And we were hoping that this peace process would also result in the trade volume going up to almost $5 to $7, $8 billion in a span of next 4 to 5 years. But unfortunately, the process was disrupted. There is a very good study which has been carried out by a Mumbai-based think tank called Institute of Conflict Studies. And they have undertaken a study highlighting the costs of conflict in South Asia. And according to this study, which is based on empirical evidence, the GDP growth of South Asian countries, mainly India and Pakistan, can go up by 2 to 3% in case there is a peace between the two countries. Unfortunately, with the new developments which have taken place since last year, it basically makes it impossible for Pakistan to engage with India because of some serious reasons, unless, of course, India reverses its 2019 decision to repeal Article 370 and engage Pakistan in a forward-looking peace process. Now, there are a lot of people who are saying that why should we make trade and these other nations hostile to this Kashmir dispute. But unfortunately, these are realities that we have to grapple with. We have to respond to the public sentiments. We can't undertake a foreign policy initiative which does not enjoy the support of all political parties and our public. And then one last word that I would like to say, that for any peace process to proceed further, there are 4 or 5 important elements that we have to take into account. One is the vision of the leadership. The leadership has to be visionary and bold. Number 2, there should be a broader domestic consensus in support of that initiative. Thirdly, in the context of Kashmir, obviously the Kashmiris need to be involved. And fourthly, which is very, very important, the support by the core constituencies, is very, very important. And the core constituencies mean people who are, the government officials, the people belonging to the intelligence, these people dealing with the foreign policy issues. They have to be fully on board because they also have tremendous ability to either advance the process or to create hurdles in the process. And I think media support is important and the international support is also important. But unfortunately, this regional, SARC is also kind of stalled this process because of the difficulties which have been created by India in the region. Thank you.
Can I add something?
Certainly, ma'am, please.
This young person was asking whether GREF could have in its discussion points Jammu and Kashmir. Well, all depends. The fact is that firstly, when Jalil Saab has spoken about SARC, I would also like to refer to SCO. Now, SCO was an organization that we all joined. Both India and Pakistan joined at the same time. But most of these organizations have a sort of a basic understanding that no bilateral issues will be discussed in that context. So what remains for us is, of course, the UN, the OIC, whatever your views about the OIC may be. But the fact remains that the OIC despite its difficulty in, of course, what an organization produces depends on its membership. But let's not forget that it's UIC that has adopted a number of very important resolutions. It has a contact group on Jammu and Kashmir where discussions on Jammu and Kashmir take place. Yes, we have had difficulties, but that is because there are governments within the OIC who have a different view on it. And therefore, I don't know if GREF will be in a position to discuss Jammu and Kashmir as a part of it on its agenda. But let's also not forget that there are countries within the grouping that you're looking at who've spoken about the issue. Turkey has been very vocal. Iran has made statements. China has been has made its position in the Security Council and elsewhere. Russia has not necessarily come out openly, obviously, and it has very good relations with India. But it did not stop some kind of a discussion within the Security Council itself. So formally, I don't think it can handle it, but informally, of course, it has members who've spoken about Jammu and Kashmir and their position on it. Unfortunately, we are stuck in a very bad situation, and I completely agree with Jalil Saab that perhaps it's not. This is not the moment to talk about trade or economic relations with India, because there seems to be no rationality coming from the Indian leadership, unless there is a rational view of the situation that has arisen, not only in Jammu and Kashmir, but also in other issues that have directly affected Muslims in India, is something that we need to take into account while formulating foreign policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Ji Riaz Saab, please. You have to unmute your mic, please. अपना mic unmute कर दीजिएगा. Riaz Saab, your microphone is muted. आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही. Naveed, can you, as the host, unmute him, please? नहीं जी, आपका रियाज साहब, your mic is unmuted, sir.
Okay.
जी sir, now.
I'm sorry, I was using my left hand and it's also a little shaky. Yeah, since my two colleagues have spoken, I think I may also say, at this stage, I think Kashmir issue is something that we have to keep alive internationally, in particular. So, in that, any efforts at individual levels, etc., they make a contribution. Within this forum, formally it is not possible. I don't see any chance of raising Kashmir, getting any kind of a statement, anything. We should not even try it. There are difficulties. But if, for example, this forum gets active, you invite people in seminars, other things, you interact with them, hopefully in the post-COVID-19 situation, then, you know, on the sidelines, you can talk about Kashmir, you can talk about any other issues that you would like, and that would be a help, in my view. Kashmir, there were opportunity, and Ambassador Jalil mentioned about 2004 to 2008 period, I would say 2007 period. There was an attempt for out-of-box kind of approach. which had some potential, but then we had our judicial crisis that simply brought everything to a halt, and then we had other events, and then I would say that hardline positions, we regressed into, not just us, but also India regressed into those hardline positions. Opportunities for these kinds of questions, they are not available for a very long period, or they have a very short shelf life, so to say. During Manmohan Singh's period, there was a possibility that we could explore, but today, I certainly agree with my colleagues that today there is absolutely no hope for any kind of a peaceful process to take root, because India's actions have literally taken the heart out of the Simla Agreement for dialogue process. Because in dialogue process, Pakistan's interest is not just security terrorism, but it is basically Kashmir. And as you must have seen the Jaishankar's statement, and by their own actions to merge the Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh into the Union, they have literally taken Kashmir, which is under their occupation, that part of Kashmir, they have removed it from the agenda for a dialogue. So what kind of a meaningful dialogue can we have with India? I am not that much sort of, when speaking here, that much focused on India, but I would say that in these kinds of approaches, the bilateral linkages are extremely important. For example, the trade that you can have with China, there are opportunities. We have free trade agreement, and we have earlier we had the preferential trade agreement. Were we able to take advantage of that? But for advantage, you have to develop capacities. Those capacities were not there. I remember that we had, for example, got from China this possibility of exporting our mangoes and our citrus. I had met the minister. The minister said that, well, there are 200 applications from various countries. We will put you first and we will give it to you. But what I am not going to do, and I cannot do, is that I will waive off the phytosanitary requirements. That is pest control. That you will have to do and send the things after phytosanitary process to China. And we found that Pakistan had a facility only to process 50 kgs of mangoes in 10 hours for phytosanitary certification. Now, you can't have exports on that basis. So, you see, you have to develop capacities. Textiles, I think Mirza Saab would know much better than us that how Bangladesh has more textile exports than our total exports. So we have to look at these things. These on bilateral level with Iran, with Russia, with Turkey. We should develop these bilateral linkages, strengthen them, and also at the same time we should have these kind of collective activity wherever it is possible, because all these things, they supplement each other. So this would be my sort of take on this.
Thank you very much, sir. G, would any of the students have a further question? G, please.
I have a question that
I would be grateful if you could start by giving your name and then ask the question.
Sir, my name is Mohammad Moazeli. So, sir, my question is golden ring block. As we say that, as we are working for its perfection, sir, as we can say, golden ring block will work as a progress for all states, either way, in economically or strategically. So, what could be future possibilities for Iran as it is facing economic sanctions? Uh, Economic sanctions due to proliferation. Sorry to say, as it is facing economic sanctions through by US. So may I repeat or not?
No.
Thank you.
I will repeat your question so that if there is any clarity required, you can uh, correct me, please. Your basic question is with how can GREF help to overcome an increasing trade with Iran which is limited due to the US sanctions on Iran. Am I correct? जी आपका mic off है. But that is what I understood.
Sir, you are right, sir. I have asked the same question.
Okay. I mean, before I ask the Excellency if they have any views on that, because being chairman of GREF, and the concept having been developed by my group of friends who are from the business community, the purpose actually is that we need to find ways and means to overcome these limitations of sanctions on some of the countries that we are trying or proposing or proponents of with whom we can be able to increase our trade. It is not only Iran which is under sanctions, there are a lot of Russian companies which are under sanctions. If you recollect and if you are reading newspapers, you would know that we have a memorandum of understanding with Russia, which talks about making the north-south pipeline in Pakistan to take white oil from Karachi northwards up to Rawalpindi. And the project, the Russians have the money, they are willing to do it. The problem lies in the fact that whichever companies were nominated by the Russians, that they can undertake this project on behalf of the Russian government. There were problems because those companies were under US sanctions. And if we in Pakistan, the government was to allow these companies to work on them, there would have been problems and Pakistan would also come under sanctions. Same is the case of Iran. I'm sure we are all frustrated as to why the Iran-Pakistan gas pipeline has not been completed and why we are not getting gas from Iran at cheaper rates and buying LNG from the Gulf countries. But the fact remains, if we do that, then the entities which would be utilizing that gas would also come under US sanctions, or the government of Pakistan would also become fair game for the US government to twist us more by the use of sanctions that we are working with Iran. If you recollect again in this perspective, when when the US put sanctions on Iran about exporting its oil, India and Japan were given a 6-month window in which whatever they had paid for, they could collect from Iran. But other countries were not given that. So these things is what GREF is endeavoring to find out. As we go along and we come to the areas of economy in this webinar series, where we will be talking to we'll be talking on one side to economists, and we would on the other side, we'll be talking to business community, and we will that is when their views can come up of how to come up with barter trade agreements. For example, the government's initiative of opening these border markets. So both sides can bring their goods, keep them there, trade them good to good, and you do not have to do any exchange of monies, which becomes a liability. So those are some of the ways how we can move around and avoid getting affected by these sanctions. And like Riaz Ahmad Khan and others, Excellencies mentioned, if we have Biden coming in, probably a large number of sanctions with Iran would be lifted, giving us more opportunity of enhancing our trade with Iran. Would any of the Excellencies like to add anything, sir?
I'd like to just make a brief comment in this regard. I agree with the entire analysis you've given about the pipelines and about Iran and about Russia. Now, in the case of Russia, as you rightly pointed out, the problem was that the entities that they had suggested to build the pipeline were under sanctions, and obviously it would have created a huge problem for Pakistan. As far as, I'd just like to take the example of Turkey and Iran as an example of how they are two countries that have a great amount of trade amongst themselves. But let me put as a footnote that in the past, since the US sanctions have been implemented, 70% of trade between Turkey and Iran has fallen, it's declined. Nevertheless, Iran and Turkey have been able to do trade with each other for three reasons. One, they have banks. What is the problem of Pakistan? Pakistan has not been able to set up a bank that could work with Iran because of the problem of sanctions. They have a bank, they have an Iranian bank in Turkey. Number two, they have 7 border markets on which they work off, and they work through informal and formal means. Mostly is informal means, through barter, through cash, through quota for locals, and on the basis of gold as well. In the exchange goods on the basis of gold. So there is no financial money transaction that takes place which comes under the radar of the US. We have an additional problem because we are under the scrutiny of FATF as well. So we have to look at US sanctions, we have to look at where FATF takes us. Thirdly, there are a large number of Iranian companies that are in Turkey that are trading for Iran there. But and as I said, they have a banking sector. India was able to had a bank that worked with Iran as well, but that's also gone because of the sanctions. On oil, as you pointed out, they had an agreement between India and Iran, and that has been taken away as well. And the flexibility that was given to US. So, and of course, on our part, we need to be more imaginative as well on trade with Iran. One, you talk about the market, the border markets. There's only one operational market, that is in Taftan. We have to see how we can build more markets, the possibility, but all of it has to be done in a kosher manner in order to ensure that that we do not fall under US sanctions, because we cannot have another problem lurking for us. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
I have a slightly different point, which may be somewhat outside the purview of your particular initiative. There are many companies, Japanese companies and others, European companies, who are now interested in pulling out of China and relocating themselves. Hasnain Saab would probably tell us, is there a possibility that we can attract those kinds of investments to Pakistan? Because most of these investments are going into Thailand, into Vietnam, into Philippines, into Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, but nothing seems to be coming to Pakistan.
Can I respond? Yes.
Sir,
You rightly said that they are pulling out and they are not coming to Pakistan. I think you said, or somebody, or Ambassador Jalil said, we have a problem of ease of doing business. When you want to come to Pakistan, unfortunately, our Board of Investment and the government regulations and rules, that there's so many. We have 148 different departments where you have to go and get your NOCs. So these companies, these Japanese, they do not want to waste their time. That's why we have talked to them in the chamber. I remember they were talking, they came to us, and the first thing they said that you take care of your these local problems, and then we can come in. So you are right that this we have to also correct our things and make the ease of doing business this phenomena workable. So this is the problem. They are willing, but they are afraid of coming to Pakistan due to so many insecurities, or so many this red tape things which are hindering their coming to Pakistan.
Thank you very much, Hasnan. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have taken a long time. We have taken a long time of our esteemed speakers for today. And I would like to start to thank the three of them for taking the time out and joining us and enlightening us with their enlightened views. I mean, I have a lot of, having worked with all three of them, have a lot of regard and respect for them. Not that I don't have it for the others who have been in their shoes before and after that. But once you have worked with people more closely, then you have a different kind of personal relationship with them. And I would like to thank them sincerely from the bottom of my heart for taking the time out, especially Riyadh staff, where it is so early in the morning. And thank you so much, sir. I would also like to thank the UMT, Abid Shirazi sir, and for joining, for being with us and giving us this opportunity to be able to host this webinar through the UMT, the Department of Political Science and International Relations, Dr. Shoaib, and especially the students who participated in such a large number from there. The ORIC UMT, the technical side and the research side of UMT who helped us, the participants and the GREF members who were there present for today's webinar. Thank you so much, sir. We shall endeavor to keep in touch with you. We will, as we go along with the series of webinar, keep sharing with you our next webinars. And if you have the time and the opportunity and are interested, you are welcome to join us. We would also like to welcome any sort of input that you would like to contribute to GREF in whatever manner you deem it important for us to consider, view, so that we can continue to try and serve Pakistan in as much good manner that we can. Thank you so much, Excellencies.
Thank you so much.
Khuda Hafiz. Khuda Hafiz.
Thanks.